Yep, you'll see it's going live in a minute.
Okay.
Ow. That's like something for like a torture chamber.
All right, you're live.
Okay. Can we begin the meeting by standing for the Pledge of Allegiance? I
Pledge allegiance to the flag of
Flag,
the United States of America,
and to the republic
for
for
which
which
it
it
stands,
stands,
one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty
and justice for all.
for all. Mr. Romagino, I'd like to take the roll if I may.
Okay.
Mrs. Abreu,
Here.
Mr. Capano,
Here.
Mrs. Fredo. I believe she's
He's
muted.
muted.
I see her though. Dr. Pantoliano? Dr. Pantoliano? Mr. Raincourt?
Yes.
Mr. Russo?
Here.
Mr. Shelley?
Here.
Teddy?
I'm here.
Okay, very good. Mr. Romagino?
Okay, thank you. I just want to take a couple of minutes to just go over a few items before we look at our consent agenda. I just want to make note that today officially was the last day of virtual learning for our students. The last day for staff is Friday, June 19th. They'll be finishing up some submitting of grades and other housekeeping tasks that take place at the end of the school year. But today was the last official day for our students. Just a couple of things I wanted to just remind the public of and the board. We're still going forward with our virtual graduations. June 29th, which is a Monday, will be the middle school, and June 30th, which is a Tuesday, will be the high school. Both middle school and high school are in the process of organizing the virtual programs, whether it's taking pictures of students, families, and other things that will be going on. So we will be showing those virtually. Since the last time we met, I know I've sent an email out and I've sent some correspondence to parents. The governor has said that after July 6th, he will be lifting outdoor gatherings to 500 people. And that means that we are also going to plan some type of live celebrations for our middle school and high school students. Right now, we have tentative dates of July 8th for the high school and July 9th for the middle school. There'll be two sessions. There'll be a 3 o'clock session and a 6 o'clock session. And the reason for the two sessions is not to go over the 500 occupant limit. Right now, the plans are tentative. We're in the process of, we'll be meeting with the police and the borough for their help. We're also going to be meeting with the administration from both buildings. But right now, we feel that if we do a 3 o'clock and a 6 o'clock, we'll be able to socially distance on the high school field. We will have student with two parents or guardians or close relatives. And we're going to limit to that so that we can stay within the 500 occupant limit. So we will be printing tickets. We will be giving tickets to the students, both middle school and high school, so that they can bring two people of their choice with them. And, the program will be not exactly like our graduation per se, but we will recognize students. We will have them come up, pick up their diplomas with their parents. So after the 3 o'clock is over, that will give us time to disinfect the chairs. We'll have our custodial staff there, disinfect the podium, whatever else needs to be disinfected, and then we'll be ready for our 6 o'clock second part 2. More than likely, it'll be divided up by alphabet. So students with named A through L might go first, and then so on and so forth. That hasn't been finalized yet, but Mr. Bogner and Mr. Pinto will be sending out notifications to parents and students, letting them know the specifics of those 2 dates, of what's going on those 2 days. And we will also have 2 rain dates set aside, just in case, probably the 13th and 14th, but all that will be put in writing and sent to the parents. Any questions on that right now?
Mr. Romagino, in other words, there'll be sets of 3 chairs
Yes.
spread out on the field. Okay.
Right. And fortunately, the field is big enough where if we have sets of 3, we'll be able to socially distance them. Everyone will have to wear masks. So we will follow all protocol, whatever the guidelines are from the state at that time. Wearing masks, yes, we will. And, we should be okay as far as that's concerned.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. I sent you in an email a recent demographic study that we had done by Ross Haber and Associates. I don't know if you had time to look through the demographic study, but with all that's been going on with the virtual programs and closing at the end of the year, I'm going to put that off and have that a discussion regarding the demographic study in July. It'll give you a little bit more time to look over the numbers, but I would like to talk to the board about the 5-year projections, what the impact could be to current classroom space, staffing, budget, things like that. So we will discuss it. And but I did want to get it out to you. This way, at your leisure, you'll have time to look it over. So I'm going to mark July. And Mr. Alfano, I don't think we set a date yet, did we?
I don't believe so, Mr. Romagino. It's usually probably going to be around 21st or 22nd. We'll get that confirmed in the next week.
Okay, so we'll get the dates out to the board and to the public as to when we'll set the July meeting. Usually in July, we have one meeting, a combination of our work session and our public session, since it's the summer and usually it's a little bit slower. I did meet today with a district-wide committee that I had set up, about 37 people on the committee, a cross-section of staff members, supervisors, custodians, cafeteria, busing, just to talk a little bit about what September might look like. And, today was just talking about some what ifs, but we are really waiting for the governor and the Department of Ed to send out guidelines for September, because until then, it's very difficult to make specific plans for September. And we could talk about what the nurses' offices might look like or what supplies we might need, little things, but it's very difficult to plan what a classroom might look like, how many kids, do we have to take temperatures when students and or staff arrive at the school? I don't know if any of this will be mandated, but we're preparing for it just in case. So when we do get the specifics from the governor and the Department of Ed, I will be meeting with our principals. I'll be meeting with a district-wide committee. We'll be sharing recommendations to the board. None of us really know at this time if it's going to be, if you can do this, fine. If you can't, go virtual. So I don't know. Right now, a lot of the specs that they gave us for summer camp or for summer school are pretty difficult in terms of the number of students in the class, what has to be done when students enter the building. I don't know if September they'll ease that a little bit more because we'll be further along. But until we get that notification from the state, again, it's really just many what ifs as, what could we do or what are the expectations? But we will be spending a good part of the summer planning for what I hope is a live opening in September where everyone's back to school. As far as back to school is concerned, fall sports, I know you've heard the governor talk about youth sports. Youth sports are different than high school sports. So there's really been nothing as far as high school sports yet. Everything that he's spoken about are team sports, soccer leagues, little league, things like that that are outside of the school. The only thing that we can do as a school right now are virtual meetings with the kids. We still haven't been giving any okay yet as to whether or not we can start actual practices or what the guidelines will be. I spoke with Dave Profito today. He said that he expects by Friday or early next week, the state association, will be sending out some guidelines. I'm sure they're in consultation with the governor and the Department of Ed. So once we have specifics on that, then we can also start talking about appointing coaches for the fall season, which we normally would do in May, sometimes the latest June, but I've held off on that, and most districts are, because we just don't have any guidelines as to whether or not there's even going to be a fall season. So once we get that information, then we can move forward with recommendations for coaches for the fall. Same is true for co-curricular activities, once we know whether or not we're actually going to be back. So I'll keep everyone informed as far as that's concerned. One thing I did want to mention is that our next meeting, we are going to have a resolution that's going to approve the board self-evaluation. You know that you had the opportunity to take part in that, I think primarily in March. I sent you a copy of the self-evaluation, which is completed by you, the board members, and all the ratings and comments that were made. So we're gonna have a resolution to accept that at our next meeting. I don't know if anyone at this time has any questions about that self-evaluation or wants to comment on it prior to next week's meeting. Okay, so then what we'll do then is next week I will have a resolution that'll accept the board self-evaluation. And as I mentioned earlier, I'll also have a resolution to accept my evaluation, which I know later on at a personnel meeting you're going to discuss. Those are things that are mandated by the state, so we're just following their guidelines. I do want to mention, I emailed you this week that we're pretty proud of some of our high school students. Sean Adler, who's an English teacher in the high school, had his classes write some essays about their insights on COVID-19. They published a book. I spoke to Steve Fogarty, our attorney, and we drew up a release for parents to sign so that we can publish the book. And right now the book should be on Amazon for sale. And any profits from that book will go towards the high school PTO organization. And they in turn use that for different events for students and so on and so forth. I asked them if they could send the board complimentary copies so we can look through them, or at least a few. He said he'll be doing that. So once I get them, I'll share those copies with the board. But I did read a couple of the essays and they are very, very good. Our kids and the teacher did an excellent job putting that together. Any questions on that? Okay, so at this time, if there are no questions, I'm going to go to the consent agenda and just point out a couple of items before we take a vote on it. You know, June is usually the time of the year when we approve contracts for the following year. So between this week and next week's meeting, we'll be reappointing all of our staff, support staff, and so on and so forth. So we're in the process of putting an agenda together that takes a little bit of time to get all that information. Gia is doing it now. She should have it out to the board by Friday, so you'll have time to review it. But again, it's something we usually do this meeting, but with the contract not settled and the salaries not finalized yet, we needed a little bit more time. But on the personnel agenda, I do want to just point out a couple of items. We're appointing Frank Barato as treasurer for the 2020-21 school year at an annual salary of $14,420. A lot of these contracts that I'm going to just quickly go over were settled last year. So the dollar amounts have already been agreed upon last year. We're just stating them as resolution. So Gia Favano is reappointed as secretary to the superintendent at $68,513. Nancy Liocano, the central office accountant, at $70,000. Greg Luciano, transportation coordinator, at $75,000, coordinator. We have two maternity leaves that we're updating for September. Amy Matesic, who's a middle school phys ed teacher, will be taking a leave effective September 1st. Amy will be returning tentatively on or about January 11th. Kara Clinton, who's a pre-K handicap teacher at school number 5, has been on a maternity leave, and as per contract, she is asking for a year of a maternity leave for all of next year for the 2020-21 school year. She will return 2021. So we're approving that right now. 4-year contract for the years 2018-19, 19-20, 2021, 21-22 is the last resolution on page 2. And then the other pages are just expanded resolutions of the ones that I read, which we always do and send to the county for backup. Mr. Alfano, I know you have a resolution under finance.
There's a couple, Mr. Romagino. One is the retaining wall. It's a submission resolution to approve submission to the Department of Education for the retaining wall project at the high school field. And the other is a up to resolution. It's really for our capital reserve. It allows us to allocate any future funds in our capital reserve account for capital reserve projects. Those resolutions are pages 7 and 8 and 9 and 10 of the agenda, Mr. Romagino.
Before I ask for a vote on the agenda, any questions from the board on any parts of the agenda? Okay, so motion to accept.
Make a motion.
That was Mr. Garcia.
Yes.
May I have a second, please? May I have a second motion, please?
I'll second it.
I'm sorry, I'll second. I had my microphone off, sorry.
No worries. Thank you, Mr. Shelley. Okay. Okay, we'll take a vote. Mrs. Abreu,
Yes.
Mr. Capano,
Yes, but I'm going to abstain on the teacher's contract.
abstain, teacher's contract. Okay. Thank you for that. Mrs. Fredo? Okay, thank you. Mr. Garcia,
Yes.
Dr. Pantaleano, Mr. Raincourt,
Yes.
Mr. Russo,
Yes.
Mr. Shelley,
Yes, abstain on the teacher's contract.
Teddy?
Yes, and I abstain on the teacher's contract also.
Okay, thank you for that. Okay, Mr. Romagino?
Okay, so I just want to remind everyone before we close that next Wednesday, the 24th, we will have a board meeting, which also will be streamed to the public at 7 o'clock. At this time, I'd like to call for a motion to go into closed session.
I'll make a motion.
I'll
Mr.
second.
Mr. Capano, and the second was
Mike. Russo.
Mr. Russo? Okay,
Mr. Savastano,
Yes.
can you let us know when we're off?
okay, Mr. Romagino, I will sign off now.
Okay.